The worst thing we can do as breeders is to kid ourselves into believing that our dogs are perfect. All dogs have faults. The only way we're ever going to minimize the number and degree of those faults is to recognize them, determine the causes for them, and then do what we can to breed those causes out. Remember, if something is wrong, something is causing it. One note of clarification. For evaluation purposes only, I classify as pets those puppies primarily suited to be family companions, as opposed to puppies structurally suited for conformation, performance, and/or breeding purposes. Puppies possessing structural weaknesses that more than likely will diminish their physical well-being as adults, or that can impact the structural quality of the next generation, do not belong in a breeding program. And if they don't belong in a breeding program, they don't belong in the show ring, despite evidence to the contrary. They also don't belong in working or performance homes, since working and performance dogs require the soundest physical composition with the fewest structural weaknesses. This requirement is set for the welfare of the dog. Evaluations aside, I believe all show dogs should be enjoyed as pets, just as I believe all pet dogs should be as well cared for as any top-winning show dog. The more our puppy evaluation process evolved, the more I understood that learning is endless. Every litter teaches me something new. I have evaluated over 26,000 8-week-old puppies, so you would think I'd have everything figured out by now. I'm sure that will never be the case. With that said, these bonus features are offered as supplements to the information given in the original Puppy Puzzle feature. I hope, like me, you continue to learn. It is more important to keep in mind that all of the structural pieces of a puppy make a dynamic whole. Don't let yourself become so focused on details or particular pieces that you forget to look at the puppy as a whole. No single aspect is greater than the whole, and every piece affects every other piece one way or another. The only exception is when you find a structural weakness that will probably impact the quality of that dog's life. When my late husband and I first started developing this puppy evaluation process, we devised a grading system of 1 to 5 points, with 3 being an average dog of that breed that we were seeing in the show ring. However, as I watch others evaluate litters in accordance with our process, too often I see many tied scores. When most breeders first begin to use our process, they are unable to see and feel the subtle differences between puppies. If you are finding a lot of tied scores in the litters you evaluate, try using a broader scoring system. I recommend a point spread of 1 to 9, with 5 being an average. Even though your litter should be evaluated by someone unfamiliar with the puppies in order to maximize objectivity in the evaluation, that doesn't mean the breeder and observers cannot be involved. The more you have your hands on puppies, the better equipped you will be at evaluating them. I cannot stress too strongly the importance of always using a mirror for evaluations. Even after some 26,000 puppies, I still evaluate with greater accuracy and objectivity when I study the puppies in a mirror. A mirror gives all of us the advantage of visual distance, a view that we simply cannot have by looking down at a puppy on the table. Without that distance, we are inclined to focus on pieces or not focus at all. It is also critical that the setup always be identical. In other words, the same table height, the same distance between the table and the mirror, and the same mirror angle, either attached to the wall or propped against the wall. And try to wear a color that contrasts with the puppies so that you can see them clearly. For example, wear black if puppies are white, or white if puppies are black. When a puppy is lying on its back comfortably in my arms so that I can assess its temperament, I take the opportunity to check for eye color. Look at the color of the iris, but don't stop there. If the color is the same all the way to the outside edge, then the color you see is almost always what it will stay. However, if the outside edge has a dark ring around it, the eye will usually darken. The darker and wider the ring, the more the eye will darken in most cases. Properly picking puppies up and holding them in a suspended position is without a doubt the hardest part of an evaluation, but it is also the most critical. You need to position the puppy in such a way that it hangs free without bearing any weight and is completely relaxed. Even with years of experience, this is not something I can do without preparing the puppy. Using your thumb and index finger, put your right hand as far back on the skull as you can reach so that the puppy's head is actually sitting on your hand. I use the rest of my fingers for balance, but try not to put any pressure on the throat or the neck. Your left hand goes between the rear legs. How many fingers you use depends on the size and shape of the puppy, your strength, and the way you use your own body. There is no one correct way, so keep working on it until you figure out what works for you. Take your time and be gentle. Just grabbing a puppy and picking it up like this virtually ensures not only resistance, but distress. Position your hands and lift ever so slightly. If there is any resistance, stop. Reposition your hands and try again. Keep trying until there is absolutely no reaction from the puppy. A good way to practice is to start picking your puppies up in this fashion from birth, before there are any weight-bearing issues for them to resist. You will learn very quickly where the balance points are and what works best for you. Next, gently and slowly lift the puppy up slightly and slide its feet backwards across the table surface. Make sure you keep the puppy balanced and always keep the front and rear feet the same distance above the table. Have patience. This takes practice. Pause when you reach the back of the table. Lift the puppy only so that its feet are not touching the table surface and bring it back to the front of the table. Repeat this action 2 or 3 times. After the last return to the front of the table, do not let go of the puppy, but relax your grip. If you can feel the puppy relax, then, and only then, is the puppy ready to be picked up and suspended. If you do not feel the puppy relax, repeat the procedure until the puppy does relax. If you suspend a puppy when it's resisting, you teach it to resist. People have brought puppies for evaluation that even I have been unable to pick up because they have already been taught to resist. I know this has happened as soon as I reach for the head. You must learn to listen to the puppies. When a puppy tells you no, believe it. Even one bad experience can ruin your chance to achieve a completely useful evaluation. Because joint angles determine the integrity of tissue attachment, Puppies with the best shoulder angles will be easier to pick up. For instance, the straighter the shoulder, the less room there is for muscle attachment, so the more uncomfortable that puppy will be while suspended. Puppies with severely weak ewe-necks will almost always fight being picked up for suspension. If a puppy won't let you even begin to lift up its front, stop and check for a ewe-neck. If this is the problem, stop. You won't be able to suspend the puppy effectively. All you can do is the best you can do. You can try to add support to the neck or even pick the puppy up between the front legs, but your evaluation will be less accurate. Once more with feeling, this is not a race. It must be done slowly and smoothly. The entire evaluation process depends on successfully suspending each puppy in front of the mirror. You can feel the structure when a puppy is stacked, but in order to see the natural ability of the tissue to maintain and hold that structure, the puppy must be suspended so that the body is bearing no weight. Once you have looked at the mirror images of the puppy in a suspended position and then in a stacked position on the table, check the length of the puppy in relation to its height in accordance with the breed standard. Then check the length of the leg in relationship to the depth of the body, again in accordance with the breed standard. Read your breed standard or illustrated standard carefully. Not all dogs are measured in the same places on the body. Do you measure from the withers to the tail? Do you measure from the point of the shoulder or the prosternum? Do you measure to the base of the tail or the point of the buttocks? Is the proportion of leg to body measured from the elbow or the lowest point of the chest? It is our job as reputable breeders to know these specifics. Train your eye to check for structural balance. While the puppy is in a stacked position on the table, draw 3 imaginary lines for your mind's eye. First, following the angle of the top line, draw a line from the hip to just beyond the nose. The entire head should be above this line. Next, draw a line up the center of the front legs, from the ground to above and beyond the shoulders. The entire neck and head should be in front of that line. God made legs to support the heaviest part of the dog's body, not to support the dog's head. Therefore, the neck and head should always be in front of the legs. Finally, draw a line from the point of the buttocks or the ischium to the ground. That line should fall directly on the tips of the toes. These are Mother Nature's balance points on a dog. Puppies that fit within these parameters of balance are the ones best able to stand still. Of course, there are exceptions, such as the Pekingese, but these parameters apply to most breeds. Visualizing these 3 lines can teach you very quickly what a well-balanced puppy or dog should look like in a stacked position. Get in the habit of using this technique whenever you look at a dog, be it in the show ring, in photos, in magazine ads, or in the backyard. You want to train your mind's eye to recognize correctness, and visualizing these lines of balance is a simple step toward that goal. When you consider that a puppy grows for 18 to 20 months and a child grows for 18 to 20 years, the speed at which damage can be done by improper puppy nutrition is staggering. Feeding a puppy improperly for 1 month is the equivalent of feeding a child improperly for 1 year. Thus, it is imperative to ensure that your puppies are doing well on whatever you're feeding them. Position the puppy facing the mirror. Lift the puppy, making sure the front legs are hanging free, without bearing any weight, and the puppy is completely relaxed. This shows you the true structure of the front legs. Gently lower the front feet back onto the table. If the front leg loses whatever soundness was seen while suspended, the problem is usually nutritional, not structure. An intake of excess calories can allow bone to grow faster than it's meant to grow. However, the growth rate of tissue is unalterable. If a puppy receives more calories than it can utilize, and those calories accelerate the growth rate of bones beyond the growth rate of tissue, the tissue will stretch, which weakens it. This is why the structure you see when the puppy puts weight on the front assembly is worse than what you see when the front assembly is suspended. The highest incidence of nutritionally based structural problems that I see comes from premium puppy foods and from an adult formulated raw food diet. Generally, if you put the puppies on an adult maintenance food, the problems will correct themselves within a week. The older the puppy, the more time correction will take. Just remember how quickly nutritional damage can occur and how little it takes to repair that damage. But be aware, once the growth plates close, nutritional damage is permanent. When evaluating temperament, the genetic trait that we call detachment shows itself in the puppy that will not look at the evaluator. This trait makes for what we call a non-responsive puppy. These puppies generally grow up to be very independent dogs. This is not so much a negative quality as it is a challenging quality. Indeed, some non-responsive puppies can grow up to be excellent show dogs or performance competitors. Throughout their lives, however, they will march to a different drummer. Everything they do will be done pretty much on their terms. This trait is not the sum of a puppy's temperament. A puppy might be outgoing, insecure, fearful, or whatever, as well as non-responsive. These puppies will learn commands and activities not to please, but because they want to. The challenge is to convince them that learning and doing things is their idea. They can be interesting companions or an almighty trial, particularly for people who feel the need to control or dominate their dogs. Remember, we can modify behavior, but we cannot change the genetic foundation of temperament. Even though we may be able to mask some traits by increasing a dog's confidence or doing obedience work with a dog, the traits remain genetically embedded, so we need to learn as much as we can to improve the soundness of temperament in our gene pools. It is our responsibility as breeders to take care of our chosen breeds. Our breeds are not here for us to change, but to pass on to the next generation of fanciers, ideally in better condition than what was passed on to us. This includes much more than what the written standard calls for. After all, no breed standard can say everything that a dog of that breed is supposed to have or be. The most obvious example is that no AKC recognized breed standard calls for a dog to have 4 legs, 2 ears, and 2 eyes. Physiological basics are a given, and among those basics are mouths and teeth. These components are essential to a dog's survival and oftentimes a breed's intended purpose. The people who originally wrote breed standards took for granted that breeders would use common sense and would breed functional dogs. So even if your breed standard does not address these components, it is still every breeder's responsibility to pay attention to and breed for functional, healthy mouths and teeth. When evaluating mouths, check not only the bite, but the placement of the canines and the occlusion on the sides. In 8-week-old puppies, you're looking for 3 premolars on each side. There are 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top. You are also looking for the proper alignment of these premolars. The top one should fit comfortably between the bottom 2. Make sure all of the required teeth are present at 8 weeks. If teeth are missing, do follow-up checks. That way, you'll know whether dentition is an element that needs to be improved in your breeding program. When you are looking at puppies' teeth, please don't fight them. If they are uncooperative, have someone else hold them while you look. I cannot stress too strongly or too often that you never want to inadvertently teach your puppies to resist. The shoulder blades should sit at the angle described in your breed standard, which in most cases is referred to as well laid back or 45 degrees. Few people have the ability to look at an angle and determine its degree. We can all see a horizontal or a vertical line. We can determine a 90-degree angle, such as where the floor or ceiling meet the wall. But few of us can see the difference between a 45, 50, or a 55-degree angle. Fortunately, we all carry with us a tool that allows us to measure essential angles, our hand. Put your left hand out vertically and stiffen it, but relax your thumb. Don't pull it down, just close your eyes and let your thumb relax. Then, without changing the position of any part of your hand, move your wrist until your thumb is horizontal with the ground. In this position, the average hand will have formed an approximate 45-degree angle. In order to measure the shoulder angle on your dog or puppy, start with your hand in the 45-degree angle position. Put the intersecting point between the thumb and the forefinger directly at the notch where the shoulder blade and upper arm meet, keeping your thumb in the horizontal position. The inside edge of your hand will indicate where a perfect layback would be. To see how far off the shoulder layback is to 45 degrees, lay the inside edge of the fingers directly along the spine of the scapula, the ridge that runs the length of the blade, and look how far off horizontal your thumb is. Since most of us can see a horizontal line, you can eye pretty fairly how far off the shoulder layback is from the ideal. Don't get bogged down in exact numbers or you will lose sight of the whole package. Also, do not allow the controversy over the correctness of a 45-degree layback become an excuse. Always strive for the best you can. The height of the shoulder is also important. With your fingers held stiffly and laid flat across the top of the shoulder blades, you should feel only the vertebrae of the spine, not the tips of the blades. High-set shoulders on cats contribute to their impressive leaping ability, but limit their stamina. This is not what we want in a dog, especially a dog bred to work in harness. For these dogs, high shoulders can mean painful bone bruises if the harness rubs on the bone. If you have the same degree of angle in the shoulder and upper arm, whether the angle is correct or not, then the legs will drop straight down when the puppy is in a suspended position. If the shoulder is straighter than the upper arm, the legs will hang back. If the upper arm is straighter than the shoulder, the legs will hang forward. Remember, reach is where the front foot hits the ground, not how far the dog can extend that foot. Also keep in mind that a dog's foot cannot hit the ground any farther forward than the tip of the dog's nose. The sternum is the bone under the chest to which the ribs attach. The prosternum is the foremost extension of the sternum. Located on the center of the forechest, you should be able to feel a protrusion of the bone. How far it protrudes is breed specific, but you should be able to almost hold onto it with your fingers, no matter what breed the puppy is. The muscles that hold the upper arm against the rib cage are attached to the prosternum. Since you can only have as much muscle as you have surface to attach it to, a perceptible prosternum surface is critical for proper forward motion. The prosternum is on a horizontal line with a notch between the shoulder blade and the upper arm. If you draw a horizontal line from the prosternum to the rear, this line should be centered between the highest point of the shoulders and the underline of the rib cage. This also gives you the approximate same length of your shoulder blade and upper arm. So if the prosternum is in the center of the puppy's front piece, the puppy does not have a significantly short upper arm. Only when the prosternum is low on the chest does a puppy have a decidedly short upper arm. If the prosternum is too high on the body, the upper arm is going to be too long, which in turn will create either a short shoulder blade or a high-set shoulder blade. Of course, the straighter the upper arm is, the shorter the upper arm will be, but never as short as when the prosternum is low on the chest. As I mentioned in the original video, I see few short upper arms in the extreme. Short upper arms seem to be very breed specific. I have seen none in many breeds. In some breeds, short upper arms seem to abound. In other breeds, they show up only infrequently. But I stick to my original comment that they are not as rampant as people think. We have much more of a problem with straight upper arms than we do with short upper arms. The prosternum is also an attachment point for the muscles on the front of the neck, so the surface and the placement also have an influence on the dog's neck and head carriage. The depth of the rib cage in the 8-week-old puppy needs to be what it is supposed to be as an adult. It also needs to have flatness to the bottom behind the elbows. When felt from beneath, the rib cage should feel firm and full, just as it does when felt from the top. When the rib cage feels slab-sided, weak, or spongy, many times the rib cage will develop without proper depth and with a thin, weak appearance to its lower section. One vet described this type of a chest as having the feel of a taco. As adults, these dogs will usually have too much space between the rib cage and the upper arm. The ribs attach to the sternum, which should run fairly parallel to the ground until the 9th rib. The last 3 ribs attach to each other, which creates the tuck-up. When the sternum is too short, the ribs have nothing to attach to. This creates a herring gut. You want the sternum to reach as close to the belly button as possible. When it is barely past the elbows, all remaining ribs attach to each other. Mother Nature will not allow any part of a dog's heart or lung to extend beyond the rib cage, so it stands to reason that there is a direct correlation between a herring gut and lung capacity and stamina. A herring gut does not necessarily have any relationship to a long loin, which I will discuss next. Measure the loin from where the last rib is attached to the spine. The longer the loin, the less support there is for the back. A long loin in itself very seldom creates much of an issue when the dog moves, other than a little wasted motion from the loin moving up and down. This up and down motion is most obvious on a dog with a scissored coat. all movement should be forward motion. Anything else is wasted. But if you have any structural issues, front or rear, that affect the top line, a long loin may intensify it. Always remember to look at every aspect of structure in relation to the breed standard. Of course, there are always exceptions, but generally, if you drop a plumb line from the point of the buttocks to the ground, that line should fall on the tips of the toes. This is a natural line of balance and is the best indication of what would be correct rear angles in most breeds. If the toes are in front of that line, the angles will be too straight, such as what is required in a chow chow. If the foot falls behind that line, the dog will be over-angulated. After checking that line, measure the length of the upper thigh and the lower thigh by bending the leg. If both bones are approximately the same length, the hock will touch the point of the buttocks or ischium. If the lower thigh is longer than the upper, the hock will extend beyond the ischium and the stifle joint will be too far up on the leg, oftentimes into the skirt, which is the skin that hangs down from the loin. This gives the appearance of a straight leg, lacking in stifle angle, but it's only an illusion created by the difference in bone lengths. When the foot falls behind the line of balance, the puppy's rear legs are too long. Long rear legs can be caused by excessive length in the femur, the bones of the lower thigh, or both. Most people refer to this as being overangulated. Overangulation also leads to what is commonly called sickle hocks. Puppies with long rear legs tend to pull their rear feet forward to the natural balance point, which gives the illusion of sickle-shaped rear pasterns. Sometimes when an overangulated dog moves, there is not enough time in the sequence of motion for the long rear legs to drive all the way forward to the center of the dog and then to extend back. By the time the rear pastern is perpendicular with the ground, the sequence is over. For this reason, long rear legs may move like a sickle in action, all forward with no rear extension. You can teach the puppy to stack in a normal fashion with the rear pasterns perpendicular, but this will cause added stress somewhere else and will eventually lead to a structural breakdown. Many times the breakdown is in the stifle. When this damage occurs, the dog will either stand cowhocked or will pull one leg forward and will stand like a German Shepherd. If forced to stand in a stacked position, the knee will start giving and the top line will become more and more sloped. A true sickle hock, when the rear pasterns are actually curved and do not flex backward, is a pretty rare occurrence. I just recently evaluated only the 9th puppy out of 26,000 with true sickle hocks. As with long rear legs that are too short can be caused by a lack of length in the femur, the bones of the lower thigh, or both. When the rear legs are too short and the toes are in front of the line of balance, the legs create a column of support under the body. This usually flattens the angle of the pelvis, which in turn raises the rear and/or creates a gay tail carriage. Short rear legs also destroy a dog's balance and smoothness of motion. Rear legs that are under the dog as opposed to behind the dog prevent proper rear drive. When the pup is standing on the table in a stacked position, slide a ruler across the outside surface of the stifle. If the placement of the knee is correct, the ruler will follow the direction of the patella or kneecap and come to rest on the inside edge of the front leg. If the ruler flows to the outside of the leg or even further out, that puppy is going to be much more susceptible to injuries. The change in the angle of the stifle interferes with the ability of the joint to bear weight properly. Since structure is all about balance and compensation, the puppy has to come up with some way to compensate. The three most common ways a dog compensates for knees that point out are to, number one, move wide behind. The dog looks like it's wearing a dirty diaper. Sometimes the dog moves this way for only a few steps, and sometimes it moves wide, normal, wide, normal. Number two, move in a swishy, sashaying motion, like the tail is wagging the dog. Or number three, move in a bicycling action, a piston-like, instead of a long, forward-reaching action. Improper alignment of the stifle also causes excess motion of the soft tissue. This can lead to a higher risk of patella and anterior cruciate ligament or ACL problems, such as torn cruciate ligaments. One of the most common causes of ACL damage on either a football player or a dog is a side impact to the knee. The more the knee flows away from the body, the higher the chances are that it will get hit. According to the experts, 75% of all canine orthopedic surgeries are on the rear assembly, with ACL surgery being the number one procedure performed. I agree that we need to be improving front assemblies. However, our most serious problems are in the rear assemblies. So while we need to improve fronts, it is imperative that we fix rears for the welfare of our dogs and their future generations. With the puppy in a stacked position, there should be no rotational motion of the rear legs. They should be totally stable. If they rotate outward, the dog has a tendency to build excessive muscle mass, which in turn limits the rear drive. Consequently, the dog's range of motion in the rear grows progressively shorter. I have yet to learn exactly what causes this, but it is incorrect, so something is causing it. Stability is created by opposing force, so it is important that muscle mass is the same on the inside and outside of the rear legs. Cow hocks are caused by there being more muscle on the inside of the leg than the outside. It should be noted that other structural elements, such as rear feet that turn out or stifles that point outward, can cause the illusion of cow hocks. Barrel, spread, or open hocks, depending on which standard or which reference book you read, are caused by there being more muscle mass. Faults found in the top line are usually symptoms of structural weaknesses in either the front or rear assembly. One of the exceptions to this is called a weak union. A weak union occurs when the vertebrae that connects the loin to the hip have more space between them than what is considered normal. To compensate for a weak union, the body may build a rope of muscle across the affected area. Many people mistakenly assume this lump is just a roll of fat. However, a weak union must be recognized for the fault that it is and taken into consideration when planning out our breeding programs. Type is crucial to the dog show world, and it should be. After all, breed confirmation is founded on type. However, breed confirmation is also dependent on the functions for which breeds were developed. Remember, breed standards are the physical blueprints that enable purebred dogs to do the jobs for which they were originally bred. Even though the majority of dogs in the United States are no longer employed in the field or on the farm, more and more dogs are competing in agility, obedience, field trials, and so forth. So even dogs bred as companion animals require sound structure in order to be even-tempered and thus companionable. Therefore, I hold to the belief that structural quality is as important as breed type. Engineers can relate to the essential design of the dog. The dog's structure serves a purpose. If a structure is so weak or improper that it cannot fulfill its purpose, then the dog with weak or improper structure is more likely to break down. And asking any dog to perform any task for which its structure is poorly equipped is cruel. Because the human-animal bond is strong, most dogs will do what we teach and expect of them for as long as they can. They'll jump, herd, hunt, run, walk the neighborhood, jog the track, or take to the agility course until their physical structure is incapable of one more effort. How soon they reach that point depends largely on our awareness of and respect for their inherent strengths and weaknesses. What happens when dogs reach the point of breakdown? Usually, they simply stop doing the activities that create pain or discomfort, and the average owner's initial reaction is frustration with the dog. More times than I can count, I have been approached by owners wanting to know why their dogs have suddenly stopped taking jumps after so many good obedience or agility performances. These people want to know why their dogs are being disobedient or just plain lazy. In almost every case, the dog's structure has broken down. Most people are truly unaware of their dog's physical condition when such behavior patterns begin to change. They don't realize the body is simply telling the dog it cannot do another jump. I firmly believe that if more breeders had a working knowledge of canine structure, we would see far fewer structural weaknesses in both the show ring and the performance arena. You cannot blame someone for not knowing what they don't know, but you can blame them for not wanting to learn. It disturbs me to hear a breeder say, "This one isn't good enough for the show ring, so I'll sell it to a performance home." It distresses me even more to hear a performance person tell a breeder, "I don't want a show dog, I just want a pet." The performance people need the most structurally sound dogs. Breeders and performance people have a lot to learn, and the first thing they need to know is that the information is out there if they really want to learn. One of the dog world's worst tragedies occurs when a structural problem becomes so pervasive in a breed that it is accepted as a normal aspect of the breed. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. The answer lies in education, in making an effort to learn what correct structure is and what the potential consequences of incorrect structure are. For example, a dog acquired for jumping in obedience or agility should have no looseness in the elbows or lack of prosternum, both of which can cause stretched and damaged tissue in the front assembly. The damage occurs every time they land from a jump. The straighter the shoulders, the taller the dog. So jumps will be set higher in obedience or agility competition as a result. Straight shoulders create more concussion on the joints. Thus, dogs with straight shoulders are more likely to suffer shoulder and elbow injuries, followed by arthritis. The shorter the upper arm, the higher the risk of elbow and pastern injuries. Stability is created by opposing force. If you don't have balance of muscle on both sides of the legs, the dog loses stability in the rear assembly. Therefore, a dog with barrel hocks must slow down to make sharp turns, thus risking serious injuries when working livestock. A dog with slipped hocks should never be expected to do lure coursing, herding, or repetitive jumping, because the lack of stability in the hock joint damages the tissue integrity and eventually causes bone or joint deterioration. A sporting dog with a U-neck will eventually be incapable of carrying a bird. A U-neck also affects a dog's ability to swim. As balance is aided by the head, a U-neck also affects the balance of a dog. A dog with a U-neck generally will be clumsier and thus more at risk of injury when jumping or making fast turns. High shoulders are one of the most destructive weaknesses for a dog in harness. A dog bred to go to ground is unable to do so effectively if its loin is too short or non-existent, because he or she loses the ability to turn in tight quarters. A dog's stamina is notably curtailed if the dog has a herring gut or high hocks. A weak underjaw prevents a strong grasp. An overangulated rear causes a poorly synchronized gait, which diminishes a dog's efficiency of motion. Shoulders set too close together impede the ability of a tracking dog to put its nose to the ground. Dogs are built to walk on all four legs. This structure creates an overall balance of muscles across their bodies. When a dog develops an extreme muscle anywhere, almost always that muscle has been built up in order to compensate for a structural weakness. Search out the weakness so that you can factor it into your breeding plans. Outstanding muscles can be beautiful. When a dog's total musculature is balanced, the dog is beautiful and much more capable of functioning without risk of a structural breakdown. The more we learn, the more our dogs benefit. Our goal should always be to do what's best for our breeds, to breed healthy, sound dogs that can lead happy, active lives. What better way to enrich our own lives as dog fanciers?